Hi everybody and welcome to video 12 for ENGG 299. Today we're going to just talk about some tips for success when you actually get to your first work placement. So the transition from student to engineer is pretty important to think about. Essentially we want you to come to your workplace with a professional attitude. That comes in the way you dress, how you conduct yourself, how you're working through the position, that kind of thing. We also want you to think not only about what the company can do for you, which is important. It's important to consider the type of work that you're getting, the type of experience you're getting, to always question things and ask for more work if you need it, or ask for a different type of work if there's something that you really want to get involved with at the company. That's all really, really great to have. But you also want to be thinking about what you can do for the company. How can you leave successfully and actually provide them with work that they're going to be able to use moving forward within their company, right? They want value for their dollar. They are paying you, right? So you want to make sure that the work you're doing is value added to their company. So success in the workplace, listen more than you talk is really, really important. And I think that this is something that students often don't quite think about, is the type of learning that they're getting out of a co-op, right? You're still in school. You want to make sure that you're taking in as much information as possible. Now, when it comes to actually you talking, you also don't feel scared to talk and speak up in meetings. A lot of companies really enjoy that when students give their perspective on things and try to make companies think a little bit differently in the work that they're doing. So don't be afraid to talk, but also make sure that you're listening, that you're asking tons of questions, and that you're really making the most of the learning experience. If you near completion of a task, just ask another, or like I said before, suggest something, right? If there's something that the company is working on that you're really interested in that you haven't had a chance to work on yet, suggest like, hey, could I work in this area, or is this something that I could take on? Keep the supervisor that you have informed of your progress, even if they don't ask. So this is something where sometimes you want to send like a weekly update email on where you're at with the tasks that you've been given, especially if you're going to be working virtually, which may happen for a lot of you. You just want to make sure that everybody knows what you're doing, and so that they know that you have stuff to work on and that you're good to go. Arrive on time. Again, this is a little bit different in a virtual environment, but please make sure that you are arriving on time. Try not to be the first to leave at the end of the day, but also just make sure that you keep a healthy work-life balance. That's also really, really important. So there's lots of stuff to consider, but just make sure that you're thinking through some of these and making the most out of the work term. Always meet deadlines is really important. And if you can't meet a deadline, make sure that you tell somebody beforehand. The number of students that I've had who have sent me their work term report a week after the deadline without telling me, without updating me, without answering to any of my emails is shocking, because you are in a professional environment. You want to make sure that you're meeting those deadlines. So I was just wondering if that's what they're doing at their job as well, which is not great, right? So just make sure that if you can't meet a deadline, you're very clear with your boss about where you're at in the project, why you need a little bit more time, but always try to meet those deadlines. Make sure that you completely understand your projects. This is where you need to constantly question things. Just make sure that if you're given something, you understand it so you can get it right and get it done right away, right? Rather than having to work on it for 3 days and then realizing you don't quite understand the scope of the project and then have to go and ask them for clarification. Try to do that all up front. And in a similar vein, if you don't know how to do a project, if you get stuck, ask somebody. So something that I see a lot of with companies is they talk about how a student needs to understand the balance between trying to work on something, like try to look it up, try to think through a problem on their own, and then getting to the point where you just ask somebody because they probably have experienced a similar issue before, so they might have a really quick solution to it. So you don't want to spin your tires too much. You obviously want to take a crack at it, really try to work through and think through the problem so that you can approach your supervisor and tell them about how you've tried to approach the problem, and then they might have a really easy solution, or it might be something that they also don't understand, and then you get to work on it together, which is fantastic. present solutions to problems, but learn to be tactful and discreet, right? It's not just saying, no, you're wrong. It's about approaching it and saying, hey, this is something that I have seen in the past, or this is something that we learned about. Is this something you've considered? Those types of approaches are typically a little bit better and a little bit better for people to take on than just saying, oh, that's wrong, right? And don't be afraid to make mistakes. So this is really important. Everybody knows that you are, I just love that gift. She's great. Anyways, everybody knows that you are a student, that you're here to learn. So if you make a mistake, just know how to approach it, right? So I always like to tell a story. The first time in one of my first jobs in student financial support, I was an awards coordinator, and I was responsible for a pretty big budget of awards. And it got back to me one day that I had accidentally given out approximately $60,000 worth of awards in mistake. And in my head, I was like, oh, well, that's more than my salary, so they're probably just going to cut me and make the most of it, right? And instead of doing that, I took the problem, I figured out a way to make it right without impacting the students. I found some awards that we hadn't given out in the recent year, tried to make things work, piece it together, and provided a solution to that problem. And it ended up working out. I did not get fired, and I have continued my career in co-op or in the university for several years after that, right? So it's okay if you make a mistake. Sometimes those mistakes will have big price tags because a lot of you are going to be working on some really impressive projects. But if a mistake happens, don't be afraid to approach it. Make sure that you tell people about it and you correct it as soon as you can. And find a mentor. I think this is one that's really important. It might not be your supervisor. It might be somebody else in your company who is working on something, loves to talk to students and help them learn. Find that person and just ask them a million questions because they typically will love to be working with you and trying to make the most out of that co-op position. So things to think about. So what's expected of you? Your attitude. So again, take on that professional attitude, be a self-starter, try to be as flexible as possible, take ownership of the projects that you're working on and really make them your own and really strive to get them done really well. And then also try to be a team player, get involved in ways that you can. A lot of companies have a lot of stuff going on in the background and they really value having people invested in their team. And so you as a co-op student, even though you're not a permanent staff, take that on and become a part of their team. When it comes to professional dress, look around, right? So if you see everybody else on your first day dress up a little bit more than you would have expected, and then when you look around, if you see people who are in jeans, if you see people who are in button-ups and in full suit pants and stuff, you just want to try to mirror the people that you're working with. And there's always that kind of dress for the job you want. And so go in there, be professional, but also you don't want to dress way over the top, right? If you have a field position, you probably don't need to go out there in a suit. So just keep that in mind. Things to learn, things like the telephone, like how does the company expect you to answer the phone? There are some companies who want you to do a new voicemail every single day and just say the meetings that you're in and that kind of thing. So you just want to learn the culture around that. Hours, what are your expected hours? How do they work with overtime in your company? That kind of thing. And with training, are you needing to do any work prior to starting at the position in your training? Do they do it all in-house? Are you going to be doing it on your own? These are all things to learn right away when you first get into a job. Sick days, what is the company policy? How do you call in? This is something that they don't typically cover in an orientation. So you just want to make sure that you know, like, do I have to call in? Can I send an email? Those types of things for when you have a sick day. For vacation, like I said in a previous video, typically it's not expected. You will typically have vacation pay on your paycheck. But if you have special events, just make sure that you're asking in advance, that you're keeping them aware of everything and that kind of thing. Benefits is something that sometimes students have access to while they're on their work term, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes you have to buy in, sometimes you don't. So these are things to think about and ask about if it's something you're interested in, or if you just want to stick to your student benefit plan. If it is a buy-in, that's something to consider as well. And then last, organization chart. Figure out where you fit in, figure out the people that are working for, figure out who would be a great person to connect with, network with, and really kind of try to make those connections as soon as you can, again, just to make the most out of the co-op work term. So some potential problems that we've seen. Internet use is a big one, right? So you just want to know what is expected. Some companies will have blockers on certain sites. Try to avoid social media, like try not to have your Facebook up, that kind of thing. You also want to think about, are you allowed to have your personal cell phone around? How does that work? How does it look? And then also with email, if you're using a company email, again, just make sure that you're not going on to a bunch of websites and using your company email for that. Try to keep it for company stuff and try to keep those separate, your personal and your professional emails. Voicemail at home is something to think about right away. So you're probably on your resume, you have your voicemail set to your cell phone. And I have had some really, really funny, if I've had to call a student, some really funny voicemails of students who have a voicemail that is meant for just their friends to hear. But you have to think about once you start using that on your professional resume, that there are going to be companies calling and potentially leaving you a voicemail. So think about changing that to something a little bit more professional. And then also, if you have an email address that's like an old Gmail, try to use your U Alberta on your resume. But if it's a funny Gmail one that you made when you were 12, again, try to think about maybe switching to a more professional email. And then the same thing with personal web pages and your Facebook. Just try to block those because people sometimes do look through them and it can impact you negatively. So just try to make sure that you up your security as best as you can. Confidentiality and ethics is something really important to think about. You're going to be working in companies who you then may, in your next work term, may be working for their competitor, right? And so you just have to think about your personal ethics and what you can bring into a position and how you maintain confidentiality between the positions that you're working in. And then drug tests is something that do happen, especially if you're going to be working up in the oil sands, and you do not want to fail a drug test, because if you fail a drug test, you will likely lose your position, right? So just keep that in mind. Be responsible, be professional, and do not fail those drug tests, please. Driving company vehicles is a big one. And this is one, so a few years back, we had a student who seemed to be doing fine in the interim on-site evaluation. Then we got their final evaluation back and it was just very, very negative. So we connected with the company, tried to see what was going on. Things had seemed so positive, and the company said, yeah, everything was going really well. Then the student got issued their first company vehicle, and they ended up going through and being in 4 accidents within a 1-month span in that company vehicle. And so that really negatively impacted the student's reputation. So it's really important for you to get that valid license when you can, but also just be comfortable driving. Try your best to get out there and drive as much as possible. If you don't have access to a vehicle, maybe put yourself into like a driver's training school or that kind of thing, just so that you can really up your confidence, because we don't want to see that happen. And we also don't want you to be in an unsafe situation, right? So just make sure that you are applying for jobs that you are eligible for. If you're not as comfortable driving, then maybe try to avoid those positions where vehicles are required, or really push yourself and try to gain those skills when you can. Okay, so it is very serious, because we don't want you to get hurt. Like I said before, try to solve problems on your own. If it comes to like HR related problems, or you're having an issue, you feel unsafe at work, that kind of thing, come and talk to us, please. It's so important. If you're feeling unsafe, if something is going on at work that you are unsure about, come and talk to us, and we can help you try to figure out the situation. I really don't want to see any of you in a situation where you don't feel comfortable at work, where it impacts your feelings about co-op or your feelings about the engineering profession. So come and talk to us early, and we're here to help. Okay, so that is all for success on your work term. As always, please come to the the regular scheduled open class if you have any questions for me, or if you want to talk about the potential for your future work terms. I'm more than happy to chat with you. Otherwise, I will see you in the last set of videos. Have a great day.